manner of preaching. Tell us about. I want to introduce Jeff this morning by letting you know that during years past, looking at how this year is so important, and we realize that what we have studied the last 9 years is actual truth. We've gone through the Word of God. And so this morning and in this month, Jeff is going to be preaching on the power of encouragement, power of positive. And he's beginning with Hebrews in chapter 10. So it's really important that when I asked Jeff, that knowing that he is a man of great commitment to encouraging saints, keep them in the fight, keep them laughing, keep them from crying, to keep them focused. It's so important that we have men that embody that and are willing to teach that. So I'm excited to introduce Mr. Jeff. Come on up and lay out how to be encouraging. Let's give it up for old Jeff. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, yeah, good lady up there. Shake your head at me. You know, the mouth speaks out of that which fills the heart. So when I'm singing, there might be a little or something else going that comes out because it's just like the spirit within me. I'm singing these songs that Andrew put together, and so yeah, it's like so. It's just like the young man back there, but he's kind of comes in all the stuff. But music's long. He might not be really singing too much in the mouth, kind of going on his head down. But it's good.
Some brothers shucking and driving too.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway. Grab that thing with chicken there and I'll cook down there. And that with the story. And if you're listening and not looking, this is plain old Jane Rock not rock, but it's painted. But he painted it. It's got a timber scene, got the wood scene on there. And let's say, take courage, have courage, have courage. And then on the back, it's got whoever painted initials and it says for you. And so you think, well, okay, well, what's the deal with this painted rock? Painted Jeff? No. So some of you have been around listening to my Lord Supper meditations this last month, talking about the mindset a little bit. But initially starting to talk about my mouth, trying to change and better in a lot of ways. But I was talking to you about what we came around the table to do, and this is to remember. But what do we remember? And many of us, and I think even the young lady, that's why Rock serves now, is she and I are a lot alike. The sense that we're our own worst enemy. is I use the analogy of the target. You know, when you're shooting in firearms practice stuff, you got a target. Sometimes you can't hardly see the little center thing, and you're trying to hit that. Well, I've done well in shooting in the past. About a little bit, but a lot of times get there and all of a sudden, you know, you get a zinger going out here and here, and it's this white clean or a clean piece of cardboard out there, or it's metal and you're seeing the little marks in the metal, and it's like, well, that's not bullseye, and sin is missing the mark. And what I would start doing, I'd start looking out here, and then pretty soon my group's even getting bigger. You know, I've got flyers until the clean slate comes up. And my mind, though, even before that, is a lot of times before I go out to practice and shoot, or you think it might be kind of a gross morbid sort of idea, but it's in warfare. But you think ahead of time about hitting the mark, about doing your job, about doing things. It's like, so thought about people shooting at and how it's going to hit, where the hits were going to hit, and to keep hitting until the target is there's no more threat. And so going out to the range, thinking, oh, it's just a piece of cardboard, but I would pretend in my mind that was somebody trying to kill me or kill others. And somebody else along the line shot rang out means that the bad guy got around. So I would practice and be so fast that my round was the first to go off. And then two, that it would be accurate. And so painting that picture in my mind of this is the goal, I'd see this one dark circle right in the center in my mind before I ever went out. And so talking about that, it was a good analogy for me as this last month. I was thinking about the clean slate versus flyers. And you just tend to, all of a sudden, you start thinking about and remembering all the flyers. What happens? You're not looking at the mark. And so, like the young lady I was talking about, I think we're a lot alike, is that we start concentrating in what? Remembering the sin versus the purification from sin. Says, you know, we have confidence, therefore, to enter. Let's go to I'll get to the story. We're going to start verse 19 down through 25. It says, therefore, brethren, since we have confidence to enter the holy place by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way in which he inaugurated for us through the veil, that is his flesh. And since we have a great priest over the house of God, slate white clean, our conscience sprinkled clean from an evil conscience. Conscience, if you're conscious of the sin, if that's what you're thinking about, that's what you're remembering. What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? And you start getting depressed, discouraged. But look at what Jesus did. And that's what we're remembering. Sort of things so that we can fix our eyes on Jesus. We have the clean target. Okay, then you got to think, okay, I'm working on this. Yeah, okay. What is it that I need to work on? My grip, my trigger control, my sight picture, my follow through, some of the basic fundamentals, you know, and just keep working. You keep what? Practicing. Practice of the word of righteousness leads to what? The discernment between good and evil. As it says in Hebrews chapter 6 or 5. Anyway, he says, since we have a great priest over the house of God, because it is our great high priest who cleans, like, who gives us the clean targets, who gives us the target himself. Yeah. Let us draw near with a sincere heart in full assurance. So some of these terms we're going to be talking about a little bit this month. Full assurance, having our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience. Our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope. Jesus is the one. He's the one that purifies me. So what am I going to do? As it talks about in Peter, he says, because of what's been done for you, therefore, with all diligence, or applying all diligence in your faith, supply basically all the character qualities of Christ, God. And he says, if these are not yours and aren't increasing, then you've forgotten your purification. We don't want to be remembering the sins. We want to be remembering the purification, because then what? Then we add to that faith. We grow our faith and adding those characters, and we just keep practicing through the Word of God. Hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised his faith, and let us. And it's like, okay, is this a command, or is this like, no? And let us consider, God, stimulate one another to love and good deeds. We're going to look at maybe a little bit of the why. Not forsaking our own assembling together as the habit of, but what? Encouraging one another all the more. There's a reason why. There's a reason I brought those lessons last month. There's a reason text between me and the young lady here the last couple of days. There's a reason why she now has that rock. And so working on those lessons last month, this little kind of retirement gig I have, driving around a little bit of woods. Alan's been out with me a couple of times. He went out this last week in this little bit of woods. Alan, how long did it take us to get out actually through the gate? I mean, how long were you actually driving the road or in the woods versus the highway? The woods itself before we actually got to the gate. Half hour, maybe. So this area I work is 180,000 gated acres. From a couple of the southeast gates of the edge of this property to this southwest edge is 50 miles. But that doesn't include all this stuff, up and down. Sometimes 2,000 feet in elevation and back down and stuff. It is a rugged country. You can get out into some of the middle of the farm, which Alan's been, and you can get on a high point, and the skyline all around is this particular property. But that doesn't include, so if you're familiar with Roseburg, Elkton, Reeds Fork, Goose Bay, or the Elliott State Forest. So from the northeast corner of this farm, there are either other timber companies or BLM. You can drive for days through just the BLM public land, old growth timber, just to get over and around between the Umpqua River particular property, all the way over to the coast into the Elliott State Forest, which wraps around towards the west side of this property. The reason I'm trying to explain is some of the oddity of this story is you saw that rock. Now, Alan's actually been with me over the last 4 or 5 years I've been doing this. I've found these painted rocks, usually at a gate. Up on there's these big steel posts with these bars where they have the locks. And this person leaves these painted rocks. A lot of times they have a scripture on the back. It always says for you. And so, but I've always found like I said, maybe I don't even know that. What's kind of odd is that twice I think when Alan's been with me, for one I actually found it in a cave. But this time I just been having that this particular rock that the young lady has now. Um, I just had it sit myself. This last month, here I was. I've been praying. I've been really working on trying to have the right picture when I'm driving around. Because a lot of times, in the wintertime, when there's no hunting season or anything else, I'll see some loggers, contractors. But beyond that, I can drive all day long and not see a single soul. Would we see one truck?
Yeah.
So we were actually driving on the farm for 7.5 hours inside this property, and we didn't even cover an eighth of the main lines in the southeast corner. Driving 7.5 hours, and that's main lines. We got on a couple side roads. That was it. That tells you the enormity of this area. So you can kind of get that these painted rocks, this person leaves. It's kind of cool that it gates and then they be found. But this particular rock, I was in the center of the farm. Mr. Compton has been with me. Remember that really cold day we about froze to death? We were deer hunting. We drove way up on this top and blowing down in there. It was right out.
Nice stuff. Yes.
So we were in basically the center of the farm, center of the 180,000 acres roughly. Well, there's a little spur road right up there. And you'll notice how steep that country drops off in some of these places. There's this little spur road that they had a land name several years ago. And the trees that are going around before they log are probably 10 foot tall or so. And there's grass and there's brush coming up. And it was a winter logging job where they went out, so they had these rock that's about this big. They just punched this little road in that's maybe a couple 100 yards long. That's it. It's right up on the little hill. Bulldozed the top of this little top there, and they put the yarder on. And then when they leave, it's like, I'm not going to be back here. It's not a road that people drive. And then they just plant trees around, so they don't parade that road. And so this day I've been praying and really trying to concentrate, because as you drive around, you're out there by yourself, it's kind of like your mind can start wandering. And I talked about girding up the loins to your mind for action. And so being intentional in how I think, being intentional about practicing. You know how I talked about practicing shooting before I ever went shooting. And it's in the mind, getting the pictures in the mind. But it's easy to get distracted and start going. And what? Thinking about the sin, thinking about where I messed up. You just screwed up again. And then you start thinking about, where does your focus go? And so Brian talked last month, it's a battle. Satan's right there all the time. He knows your weaknesses. He knows when, okay, he can put on the attack. And so it was a beautiful day. I had that, been struggling with a cold and stuff. But it's unseasonably weirdly warm. It was like in the 60s out there. So it's just beautiful. Down in the valley, cold fog, 30 degrees. But up there it's 60 degrees and sunshine. And this winter sun, midday, it's like, it's almost like backing up to wood stove heat. I actually take, I don't have a nice skin to see this light of day very often, but I actually took my shirt off just because of the vitamin D. It felt good. That sun just coming down. And so I had to answer nature's calls. I went off one edge of the landing. I kind of got my truck up on there, and I could see it. I figured, okay, I'm going to hang out up here because I can turn the rig off. I can listen for people out. I can see all over the farm. If I see a rig, I can put the binos on. If I need to, I'll work my way over across the canyons to go check them out or whatever's going on. So here's a good place just to kind of observe. It's a good place just to I can sit here, pray, watch, and here's smells. pretty cool. Off the edge of this landing, I went and I kind of looked at them. Went over and I was trying to find a place where I could sit and see the best. And there's grass down deep. This old yellow grass is dying because it's winter. Up about thigh high. There's scrub and rush coming up, and then the trees that they're planting all around the edge of the landing. There's a spot, some old logs sitting there. Where can I sit? And I was going over, and lo and behold, I looked down amongst the shrubs and grass. What I see? You can tell it's a little flat place and all the ruts and everything else. But odds to be because I've been around. I didn't try to find a place. Here was a good place. Have courage. And I just read, I think, rough right in there was in the Old Testament it says, be strong and courageous. Well, this morning I want to kind of take a look at the opposites, or the opposite of encouragement is discouragement. And why do I want to take a look at that? Because so we'll start off with things that, but it really helps define encouragement, but more so the need for encouragement. Because it places courage, like that rock did, little painted rock. Now, I don't know that I've ever met this person, but I've heard these talking, and I think it's just a young girl. No. And I had Alan take that gift to this young lady because she and I have talked a little bit about it and having kind of the same struggle with having that mindset. Courageous. So that puts it, knows the story. But then she will encourage others. She will stay the course. Just like that brought courage. Even look, sorry. We're going to take a look at the opposite a little bit so that we can see the need for encouragement. Briefly at who needs encouragement. We're going to close then today with a few more scriptures called to encourage. Why the call for encouragement? If there, what would be the need for encouragement? There's a need, and there is the call for encouragement because of discouragement. And you saw what I said, what I struggle with sometimes, having the right mindset and changing that and getting a positive. We're going to talk maybe next week or something. We're going to lead out on terms and stuff that talk about that get us courage. Then the right mindset and the right focus So let's talk, and I'm going to be kind of singing all over the place and kind of describing maybe a few of these things more so maybe from my perspective, but I know that God says there's nothing new under the sun. I think that's Ecclesiastes 1:9. And so if I get discouraged in certain areas, something that may discourage me doesn't discourage you. And that's why we need each other, because there's areas where, you know, when I'm weak, somebody else along and be strong. You know, there's fears. Fear is a huge thing, and a lot of these fall kind of under the realm of fear. So I just got an email, and yesterday I saw it, and so part of the thing of doing this job I have to do is the state requires me to, I think they want time. That's what it is. It's every 2 years. It's like, really, I got to go through this training thing, and I've been in law enforcement over 30 years now, but I got to go to this particular thing, and it's all it is checking the boxes, but it takes time, and so I'm not very techy, and so it's called a Zoom or something that you do that you meet people on the computer. Well, I've only done that every 2 years since I started doing this for this training. And it's like, you got to download something and then you got to click on this thing. And I learned that you don't click on that thingamajigger, like, because I'm a person that likes to be prepared and get there early, especially something I'm stressed over. And so I click on, well, you don't do that in this Zoom thingamajigger, because then it like kicks you out if you pop on that too early, I guess. And so, you talked about, and it's like, why is that distressing? And then somebody even asked, "Is six piece, Jack? What's the deal?" I'm like, "Look." And so he put in his email like, "You just click on this, make sure you download this, and then click on this other thing." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm not even seeing what I'm supposed to click on." So I'm gonna have to make a phone call tomorrow. But I'm telling you, it's weird. You would laugh, but it's to the point of like, I'm not going to do this job. It's a job that I enjoy kind of doing. It helps me out, helps family out. But the fear and the distress over doing this little thing is enough to just go give up and say, not going to do it. So for me, though, that brings a lot of distress. But for you, no. But what is it? It's discouragement for me. Discouragement enough to throw in the towel and say, I'm not going to do this. Distress, despair. Have you ever seen anybody despairing? Where it seems like they just kind of get knocked off the block over and over and over for whatever reason, and they get to the point of just despair. I've been to done so many suicide death investigations over the years. Did that for a while. First, before they got to the point, they felt. That's another term. Hopeless. Have you ever felt hopeless? Like, man, you look around the world today, people I was dealing with for 30 years, I would see some, and I talked to some of these people. My heart went out to them. I remember a guy, one time he actually had the dealer inject into his um, carotid artery because all his other veins were collapsed. He had this great big hole. And what he does, he got so high that he was doing some craziness. And I guess dispatch called it up for us. Somehow or another, I didn't remember him, but he Drullinger, two kids. Please help. I don't. He didn't care about going to jail. He didn't care about being arrested. He just wanted to get out. He was in despair. Praise. Hopes, uncertainties, doubt. Have you ever been uncertain? Have you ever had the doubts doubts about yourself, doubts about, and that's where I and this young lady doubts and things about ourselves so much that it gets us tied up. Satan wants to get us stuck there. He wants to get you stuck in discouragement. He wants to get you stuck in fear and distress and depression. Death. God talks about death having a sting. Have you ever been around anybody who's lost somebody? Or you've lost someone yourself? Especially something said, oh, you talk about crush. Crush, where I talked to Wayne Chester, she, for the last several years, had a friend. I mean, she sacrificed her life. I mean, her whole life involved helping this lady get here to the doctor. She actually is living with her, and she was just taking care of her completely. And then passed because of cancer. And all of a sudden, like this huge voice, because her whole life was helping this person, doing loss, crushing, broken hearted. Being from the teenage years, we kind of laugh and giggle about that, but if you remember back, it's like, man, hurt, pain. That's it. So there's right into something else, and it could be physical, emotional, or spiritual. And when it's chronic and long lasting, I can tell you, it's hard to keep a positive mindset. You're hurting all the time. When there's pain, yeah, because it's there. It's not something that you can just set aside and go do something to get away from. About dilemmas. You ever had a dilemma? I wouldn't be able to give you the definition of dilemma, but I kind of know what it is. Like, all right, so let's say we got this property that God's blessed us with, and we've been trying to do something, and it's like, the, our Constitution says the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness are supposed to be property rights. Well, this state, like, you have no property rights. And they're sucking it more and more. My neighbor had 2 lots that he paid to get legal lots. He was going to build a place for his son. All of a sudden, the state county said, even though you did all that, now we're going to say those lots are wildlife land. You can't do anything. He can't even run cattle or horses. He can't do nothing with those 2 pieces of property just because the state. So my dilemma was this has been it's like, okay, I can build like this ag building, but you supposedly can't live there. And so, but there's all this history with this property where people have lived there. There's a well, there's power, it's all approved. There's a septic, which I could prove that the county, it's been there since time began before they started having permit processes. So why build it? Why can't somebody live there? And there's no logic or reason. So how much do you outlaw? Because God says, hey, okay, you're supposed to obey the laws, the land, and respect all that stuff. But then when there's absurdities about stuff, you think about the founding fathers when they were leaving England. What a dilemma to, hey, they wanted to submit to the governing authorities, but at which point do you say, no, enough's enough? No, that God comes first. But still, you have some of those things. It's like, okay, am I doing the right thing? And you say, Jeff, well, think of dilemmas that you've come across where you're trying to balance, a lot of times there's door A, B, C, D, E, and F. And not all of them are wrong answers. I'm trying to tell young people, they're like, what career should I go? What should I go to school for? It's like, hey, use some of God's guiding principles to help you. You know, something to be able to provide for a family, something that is, not something be fun to do, but boy, you can't find a job doing it. When you get out, so on and so forth. And I said, but a lot of times God blesses us, especially in America, that we have multiple choices. But sometimes those multiple choices cause discouragement and stress when you just don't give up. It's like, well, I don't know what to choose. God, just tell me, what's your will? Right? Well, God's like, hey, look at my guiding principles. Put me first. Whatever you decide, it does not matter. How can you serve the church best? How can you serve your family best? Use those to make a decision, but it's okay. But I'm not going to tell you what. God doesn't tell you. He says, yes, do this, and you'll be blessed. This is how I designed it. But you get to choose. How do you tell me what to do? Then it's your fault. But dilemmas cause discouragement, depression, and injustice. We see a lot of injustice around the world, but even in America. When there isn't justice served, when there is just flat out injustice, doing wrong things, perversion. Wrong is right, right is wrong. And that gets depressing. Guilt, shame. I kind of mentioned that. It's like that's where Satan's the accuser, pointing the finger. Look, throw in the towel. You messed up again. You're just a screw up. Have any of you ever felt worthless? Not valued? It's like you did a group, setting. You know what? It may not even be accurate, but the feeling is still there, right? And you worked your tail off, but it's like you've done so much. They choose something else over here, the product you're providing or whatever, or that other idea, and it's like so discouraged, like why even try? You always hear me say, stay, stay. Jesus says, those who endure to the end, much is all those bodies throughout the years have to spend hours on it, dealing with that, thinking about what led up to that moment, thinking that maybe it's just one word. Unpainted rock. In the course of their life have been different. Insecurities, irritations, for sure. Irritated by me all the time. Better at not being irritating. If I poke a little bit so that's what you laugh, giggle, right today, then so be it. But I don't want to be the irritation. Like fingernails gone. But y'all know things that are irritating. It's just irritating. They have to deal with something day in and day out. Violence, harshness, rudeness. Alan and I talked about the yoke. The yoke of sin. People cannot, the only person that can take that burden is Jesus. He's the only one. Jesus The Son of God was the only one that could bear that. But that yoke is still on so many. And I talked to Alan about, what do we see with people that are carrying burden that they cannot bear? Self-destruction and destruction of those around them, because they try to transfer the guilt. They try to transfer all these negative things that we're talking about here, and they transfer them on to others because they're thinking, if I can just point the finger and get this over here and destroy others, then that guilt will go on them. But it doesn't work. Because the only way that that yoke is removed is in Christ Jesus.
Mm.
Self-destruction. Satan is sitting there jumping up and down on you and bringing all these things to destroy you. Bondage, hate. How about slander? Here you've got it. God says a good name is of more value than silver or gold. If somebody takes and slanders that name and brings it out where there's no trust, you're accused of something that you didn't do, it's that. Look at America and a lot in these groups now. It's like, well, you're a bigot because, or you're part of hate speech because you believe in the Bible, because you're going against certain groups or whatever. How about those who steal, who take, who leech off things? That is discouraging. And you look in the Bible about disobedience and rebellion. How can that be discouraging? We'll look at in the Proverbs different things where it says about a son who is disobedient or rebellious, what that does to a mother, to a father. Son who is continually disobedient or rebellious, discouraging that is, where they intentionally and knowing continue to choose that course. Those who are negative, those who are self-serving and selfish, arrogance, being around arrogant people, who are unyielding, who you can't get a word in this, but you can't try to logic and reason with them. It's their way or the highway. Unforgiving. Never had any good work. You know you should go. Carrying out instead of the cost. Being alone. You ever felt alone in a place you could be around those who love you and everything else, but you still feel alone? And it's a feeling. And feelings are deceiving, but yet they are still discouraging. Because Satan wants you to feel alone. He wants you to think that, hey, you don't belong. You don't belong in this family. You're not worthy to be in the assembly of the saints. I've talked to a couple guys that aren't assembling basically because of their guilt and their feeling of worthlessness and feeling alone that they're not. They should be because of that. This that I've been talking about, it's time to kind of wrap up. I think I'll just go to passage close. Next week we will kind of take online. But do you see, I hope, and I know it's kind of, but by looking at the opposite, the flip side of the coin, you see that there's a need. Who needs encouragement? It's everybody.
Yep.
Look at David. Look at Paul. Look at Jesus. Oh, great. all the way to the lowly Samaritan woman, Zacchaeus. Everybody needs encouragement. There is a need. Let me see. Close it up today. First Corinthians. Oh, I'm sorry. Second Corinthians chapter. Second Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 through 7. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies. So, where there isn't, where it's merciless, brings about discouragement. Mercy brings courage. The Father of mercies and the God of all comfort, which can be also rendered courage, who comforts us in all our affliction, so that we will be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. God, that day, that little girl, because I've heard from many say she's the one who paints those things, somehow or another has faith that she places those around. God's going to give us. God got its being, and now it is with somebody there to be. For just as the sufferings of Christ are ours in abundance, so also our comfort is abundant in Christ. But if we are afflicted, it is for your comfort and salvation. If we are comforted, it is for your comfort, which is effective in the patient enduring of the same sufferings. Which is effective in the patient enduring of the same sufferings. Encouragement, comfort is needed so that we will all endure. Jesus, God comforts us so that we will endure, which we also suffer, and our hope for you is firmly grounded, knowing that as you are sharers of our sufferings, so also are you sharers of our comfort. Everybody suffers in discouragement. All need encouragement. Mm-hmm. So